We hold these truths to be self-evident. Corporations are not people. Money is not speech. This is not a Christian nation. And the government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from this earth. Welcome to Disorderly Conduct.
All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of Disorderly Conduct. My name is Jesse. I am IT guy by day and armchair historian by night. And I'm joined by my colleagues yet again if they want to introduce themselves.
Yep. So I'm Mayhem. I've served in special operations in the military for 21 years. I'm retired Green Beret, and I work a part-time IT job as well.
Hey guys, I'm Bobi. I'm a civil litigation attorney in Georgia, and just here spreading my love for the Constitution.
Fingers. I'm an accountant, working musician, amateur economist, constitutional enthusiast.
Amen. So, as you guys know, one of the things we've been doing for the month of November is Heroes of Humanity. And Mayhem had started us off last week with a perfect example. Sendler, right? Is that what?
Irina Sendler, yes, sir.
There you go. Sendler, who was extremely heroic in her time during World War II with how she got all those kids out. And we want to continue that. So I, decided to kind of go through American history, and I was like, it didn't have to be American history. Like, I get that. But I wanted to, find someone that I thought was a little bit more relevant in terms of, our country and whatnot. And I found a great example of what I think is a hero to humanity because he's so badass. I wonder if they've made a movie about him. They probably haven't, but they should if they haven't. All right, so let me introduce Robert Smalls. Let's put the setting too as well, we should say. The year is 1860s, right? And the Civil War is raging. And for those who don't know, the South won a lot of the battles. So the North is very, very depleted, and they're very scattered all over the place, and the South is just having victory after victory after victory. And along comes this one guy named Robert Smalls, and he does an incredible, incredible act that I think is extremely memorable that all people should know about. But before I get there, I want to start with his life, and then obviously open different parts of his life to discussion, how they relate to the modern age, and how we can be emboldened to do this kind of stuff. I don't know if you guys had any comments before we started.
I'm pumped to get into it, Jesse. You never were disappointment.
I'm eager to hear if this is the source of the famous saying, "You're killing Smalls."
Maybe. All right. So Robert Smalls was born as a slave in Beaufort, South Carolina. His mother had worked in the household of the McKee family on that plantation, and from a young age, he observed both plantation life and the culture of the port town. These early experiences shaped his understanding of the world and the injustice of slavery. So, key point to mention, his life, his entire existence has been under the institution of slavery. He works on a plantation, but the key thing about this is that he obviously is thankfully one of the very few cases to be able to live with his family. For those who may not know or might need a recap, the institution of slavery legally saw the slaves as property. So even if slaves were allowed household and lodging to live with family, it was very common that different parts of the family would be sold off to other people who were interested. So you might have a son, mother and a father living together, and the son may be sold off to a different plantation for a different purpose. So the fact that he was able to live with them is, at least he wasn't separated from his family. Not yet, at least. When he was a teenager, he was sent to Charlestown to work and learn seamanship. So because they lived on a port town, they had connections. He moved to another part of the Carolinas, and he started working at one of the ports and learning about seafair, essentially. As a teenager, he was hired out of Charleston, where he worked in hotels as a lamplighter and eventually on the docks and harbor boats. He quickly became skilled as a sailor and pilot, and this maritime experience would later enable his famous escape, which I think is very, very interesting. He would eventually go on to marry. He married a woman named Hannah Jones. Smalls married Hannah Jones, an enslaved woman who worked at the hotel as a maid, and he tried to protect his family. He negotiated and paid installments towards purchasing their freedom, though he had not yet secured it by the time the Civil War had actually broken out. So, yeah, I think this is all kind of setting up to see where Robert Smalls is going to go, how his life is going to go. Because again, he does some pretty incredible things. When the Civil War had actually broken out, Smalls' deep knowledge of Charleston Harbor had led the Confederacy to use him as a skilled pilot on the Planter, which was the name of the ship. He quietly studied Confederate signals, routines, and defenses, information he knew would be crucial if he could escape. So this guy's like already planning his stuff. Now, I also want to mention really quick and see if you guys have any thoughts about this. I know we talked about this last time. It's really easy to see in hindsight these heroic acts and be like, yeah, I mean, of course, who wouldn't do that?
Right.
But being in the situation itself, the reason why heroes exist is because not everyone stood up, right? In this particular case, I think it's a little bit different because considering that the institution of slavery had millions of people obviously oppressed, I think it speaks to the fact that Smalls had a particular distinct courage about himself and clearly was using the skills that he was afforded, even as a slave, to begin plotting his heroic act. And I think that speaks volumes about individuals. I don't know if you guys want to throw anything in.
I think the thing that stands out to me, I mean, first and foremost, it's shocking to me the idea that that the Confederacy would trust any slave, right? You got to know what you're doing, right? And I think, and I got to tell you, as a precursor to what we're about to learn about Robert Smalls, the level of planning that you're talking about right now is by itself incredible. Knowing, hey, I've got an opportunity here, and like you say, quietly studying to prepare for that opportunity is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, same. I think I was basically the same thing. You know, the myopia of the South to just treat these people like furniture, treat these people like part of the wallpaper, and just assume they're always going to act the way they've always acted, and they're just going to uphold the systems that have been pressing them, not really seeing them as fully human, not really like seeing them as, oh, wait a minute, you don't like your life? That's shocking. I didn't consider, all the things that are so obvious. It reminds me of, I don't know if you guys have ever seen, there's a little video of Lawrence Fishburne reading the story from a freed slave to his old master. And it's just, Google it, search it out online. It's priceless because it's very like, the guy could write well. He's like, it's all written in like the flourishes of the time and is very polite and genteel. And at the end of it, like the bottom line at the end is like, so by my calculations, like you would owe me about this amount of money. So when you send me this amount of money for all the years that I was in servitude to you, then we can talk about it. It's just, anyway.
No, absolutely. And I think one thing I do want to mention as well before I continue on is it's clear that Robert Smalls not just made the best, obviously, of a situation, but he was vigilant of the times that he was in, right? And I think what a testament to his character that you have this, enslaved individual who grew up in the institution of slavery and uses the skills that he obtained to look at the winds of change coming, right? He sees that his country is at war. He sees that the North is losing, but he sees that there's an opportunity that perhaps just maybe that all the dreaming that our, my family and our ancestors have done to have freedom, this could possibly be the opportunity. And without fully knowing where this is going to go, he takes like a leap of faith. And I think the point I'm trying to get at is he was aware of his surroundings. He was aware of the political landscape. He was aware of what was going on. And I think that's important for us as we look at our current situation here in the United States and apply these characters of heroes of humanity, right? Looking at the world around you, understanding what situation you're in, what situation your country is in, and acting accordingly, basically. I think Robert Smalls is obviously a really good example of this.
I was just going to say it's the ingenuity for me, right? I mean, and really quite a degree of skilled planning and positioning and way to be a dreamer, like just maybe if I'm diligent and conscious, I can secure the freedom for me and my family. And then also what a story of not really revenge, but definitely success and triumphs, because I just took a peek at the rest of his life and it's pretty interesting.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's continue on and see where Robert Smalls is. It says here again, this was in 1861 that he was given a position on a Confederate ship called the Planter. and he was very well trusted. It says here that in May 13th of 1862, so roughly a year after he's been doing this for some time, in one of the most daring escapes in American history, Smalls disguised himself as the ship's captain, sailed past Confederate forts, and delivered the planter to the Union Navy. He freed himself, his crew, and their families that were on the ship. This act made national headlines and transformed him into a Union hero. What a, I mean, that is some serious cojones. I think that is absolutely incredible that he saw the opportunity, understood the cost of what it would mean if he got caught, right? It's the same thing that we were talking about Irina last week. Understood what it would mean, and as I think most of us should be aware and are aware of the insane cruelty of slavery, and can't imagine that there would be any punishment less fitting for obviously what we see here with Robert Smalls had he gotten caught. What do you guys think? What are your thoughts on hearing this like brave act?
I mean, it just seems to me like that alone would be a movie, right?
Right.
All of the
Right.
preparations for and all of the nail biting tension of trying to slide out past the forts. And like to your point, it's like it's not just him, right? If it went bad, it wasn't just him that would be paying. It would be all of the people with him and their families. You know, the families are inherent hostages in those situations. So, you know, but it's also illustration of what happens when you give people really nothing to lose, right? Like, even though, you know, there may be that pain and that fear of immediate reprisal, like the reality is that he's probably an intelligent enough person to go, there's nothing saying they couldn't do that to me tomorrow anyway.
Mm-hmm. True. Very good point.
Yeah, that was kind of a point about the ingenuity, right? And being a dreamer, because like you said, it could be a movie. Like it just sounds like something out of a movie, and it just really illustrates the importance of kind of analyzing your risk and reward and deciding when and where you could take your shot. Like I was talking about what's going on today and between the government and the people, and it's like it's like a double dutch. You don't want to jump too soon, you don't want to jump too late, and you just got to kind of plan everything right. And he really positioned himself well to jump on an opportunity when it presented itself, which resulted in, saving a lot of people's lives. And I think it's an act of selflessness because he surely would have been executed for it. But
Oh, absolutely.
Definitely. I think, I think somebody made the point, the nail biting experience, right? First of all, the tremendous level of trust. Everyone knows what's at stake here. Everybody knows. All of those enslaved people know what happens if he's unsuccessful. They're entrusting their lives, their literal lives, their still children's lives, and just every fort that they pass is a risk, right? And I'm trying to fathom the depth of, I don't know, anxiety, perhaps. You know what I mean? That they all must have been experiencing going through that.
Right. No, absolutely. I think also I should mention his family is back at the plantation still. So his family is back in Beaufort, South Carolina. And so I'm thinking, as if I were to imagine myself as Robert Smalls himself, what fear he might be thinking that if the news of his betrayal got back into the right, hands, would they go after his family? Would they kill them? Would they relocate them? Would they resell them? Would they separate them? I can't imagine the amount of fear that he had to have, but I think it's a noteworthy thing to mention that this kind of reminds me of, I think it's Patrick Henry who said, "Give me liberty or give me death." And it's interesting where, and I don't mean this maybe I do mean this in a derogatory way towards the founding fathers, but how dramatic they were because of taxes of give me liberty and give me death, while you have the real embodiment of the principles of the revolution inside of a slave during the Civil War, where he was to give me liberty or give me death, right? And he was willing to extend that potentially to his family, that he would rather die and be separated for freedom than live another day under the institution of slavery without taking the opportunity that he had at the moment to do something about it. I think that speaks volumes about his character. No, you're good. Go ahead.
it's the spirit of revolution, right? I mean, that's the underpinning of all of it. It's, for every, movement in American history, it's primarily spurred by the fight for liberation. And that's across the globe, right? And so people go into that and make these decisions and put themselves at risk, understanding that the cost is death.
And I mean, if I can, right, this wouldn't be disorderly conduct if we didn't bring up on freedom at least once, right? Wonderful book, right? And for those of you, if you're just tuning in to Disorderly Conduct for the first time, the book is by Tim Snyder, and it is an investigation of what freedom truly is. And in the context of that book, one of the big concepts is freedom is not something that you inherit. Freedom is something, it is not just the absence of evil, but also the presence of good. It is people willing to stick their neck out, and sometimes you must. And this is a prime example of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And just noting, those are Patrick Henry's last words before being hung. So
Death you shall have, sir.
You know, this is kind of unrelated, but I was watching a documentary on SNCC and, you know, the fight for liberation in Lowndes County, Alabama. Stokely Carmichael was organizing Black voters out there, and they were organizing at the segregated Black high school. And, you know, of course, the white people were waiting. And the sheriff, you know, but basically put a gun to his head, and he said, all you know, and we're going to die tonight. And he told them tonight hell will be integrated. And I was like, I'm putting that on a fucking shirt. Like, that is crazy. But it's found that interesting that you don't see that quote anywhere. But that, yeah, I mean, that's kind of, you know, I mean, that's just, like I said, that's the spirit of revolution. You could kill the revolutionary, but you can't kill the revolution. And it's also, I think, speaks to, you know, the fact that everybody has a role and these things, and you find out where, you know, what your skills are, right? Whatever our skill set is, and then you utilize that to propel, you know, your movement forward. So, you know, he was uniquely positioned to do that, and it looks like, you know, he scored big. So good on him.
Yeah, I wanna give a little bit more insight into how he did this. By the way, in terms of, you know, this heroic act of giving over the Confederate ship to the Union, it says here, the crew of white officers left the ship to sleep ashore, letting Smalls and his small crew actually take control during the night. So just, it's really incredible. And these guys, you know, these white officers thought they were safe. And it says here, unaware that Smalls had made his decision, clad in the captain's coat and hat that he took. So this guy's literally dressed up as a captain now. He took the helm. With quiet precision, he steered the planter through Charleston Harbor, saluting Confederate guards at each fort, using the correct signals that he had learned. The harbor was still dark when he passed the last gun battery and turned the ship towards the open sea. At the first light, they rose, and the Union ships appeared on the horizon. Smalls raised a white bedsheet in surrender and freedom. For the first time, he was a captain of his fate. Smalls became an instant hero. Newspapers across the North told of his courage and cunning. President Lincoln's advisors recognized the political power of his story. It was living proof that enslaved men were not only capable, but essential to the cause of Union victory. Smalls met with Secretary of War Edwin Stanton, advocating for the enlistment of Black troops in the Union Army. His calm intelligence and moral authority helped break the barrier that had excluded Black men from serving their nation during the war. Smalls continued to serve as a pilot now for the Union Navy.
Wow.
So it's just an incredible story of bravery, an incredible story of victory. But the best part, obviously, is that it doesn't end there. He joins the Union side as a naval officer and continues to fight against the very institution that kept, or is still keeping, I should mention, his family down in a plantation down in South Carolina. What are you guys' thoughts?
Could you imagine the feeling of seeing those Union ships? Like, oh man,
Yeah.
for everybody on the boat.
Well, a
Yeah.
whole new level of tension, right? It's like, okay, are they going to give me the chance to make my case and explain that? Like, no, please don't shoot. But also, again, it just strikes me like the myopia of those that viewed, you know, the enslaved people as less than them. That like, oh, of course, even though it's fucking obvious, don't leave like an oppressed people in complete control of a war vessel. Oh, no, it's fine. They're completely cowed. We have been completely subjugated. They're not fully human. They haven't really, like, they don't have the ability to do something like this. And of course, to be proven wrong.
Yeah, I mean I tell me more, right? This is just unbelievable, Jesse. What a good pick. And you know, and honestly, you know, to for him to have enlisted as a naval officer is even, I think, very powerful. It's a compelling part of the story, right? Historically, African Americans have been underrepresented as officers in every branch of the military, and that's even, of course, here in post-slavery America.
Yeah, it gets crazier. So ready, it says here, Smalls continued to serve as a pilot for the Union Navy. His intimate knowledge of the Carolina coast made him invaluable. In December of 1863, when Confederate artillery opened fire near Secessionville, the white captain of the Planter, now the Union Navy ship, panicked and fled below deck. Smalls took command, steering the vessel out of danger. For his bravery, he was appointed acting captain, the first African American to command a U.S. military vessel. His reputation grew not just as a man of courage, but as one of steady leadership. When the war ended, Smalls returned to Beaufort, not as a slave, but as a man of property and purpose. And in 1864, he purchased the house where he and his mother had once been enslaved, a powerful act of poetic justice. He welcomed the widow of his former enslaver into the house where she was destitute, refusing to repay cruelty with vengeance. His sense of dignity transcended bitterness. His victory was moral as much as it was material. Smalls entered into politics during the Reconstruction era. So I want to pause real quick because it goes more. There's more to this.
There's no way.
Right.
But I mean, what a boomerang, right? What a, few have the ability to escape their extreme circumstances, like in a position like Robert Smalls, right? Even fewer people are able to return to their place of oppression and change it all around. Sometimes it's just not possible for individuals. In my head, I'm actually thinking of the immigrant community right now, right? Where you have dire circumstances that average Americans here don't understand, and all they see on Fox News is caravan, caravan, caravan coming to destroy America, without realizing the depths of their situation in their home countries and how they're coming here, leaving family behind, not knowing if their family is going to succumb to hunger, not knowing if their family is going to be part of political retribution, black-bagged, or a cartel or a gang taking away their family. They're coming to the United States for a better life, and few are able to ever return and make it better for their family back home. And I think not just bravery, but what an opportunity for Robert Smalls to seize and actually go back and free his family.
Absolutely unbelievable. And I'm a couple times just hearing that on the verge of tears. I think that, what stands out to me, I was having a conversation with my mom this week, and, it was largely, the message was, choose love, right? And one of the principles that I think about often, was run free in my head, is the world will give you a million reasons to be bitter, but you only need one to be grateful.
Yeah. And I mean, I think when we think about would we or could we do these things, when I think about what I would do for my kids, like it's like no doubt. I think, especially with the immigrant community, people try and get their kids out of these situations. And it's like, I just wish these people would take a second and think, what would you do for your children? Would you cross an ocean? I think you probably would. Would you cross the Darien Gap? I think you probably would. Like, these are extreme circumstances, but people have to make the decision based on, like I said, risk and reward. I mean, what are the options here? And then you assess those and you do whatever you can, whatever the best one is. But it's born out of necessity, out of love, and I think it's a testament to love, really, that he could just stay up north, but it's that need to reach back that I think propels humanity forward.
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is, when you talk about him taking in the widow of his enslaver, as he's a better man than I, and then I put my true petty glasses on and thought, although having her look every day and seeing who's running the house now and all of that kind of stuff, there had to be a certain measure of satisfaction there.
That's such a good point, Fingers. Because I don't know that I would do it, but certainly if I did, I'd be like, my, how times have changed. You know what I mean?
Every day.
Yeah. Hey, did you finish your work?
I mean, in a serious mode, though, it makes me remember what I've said before. It's like, your oppressor's first target is your own humanity. And so, by refusing to give up his own humanity, which you would have to do to dehumanize somebody else, that's moral victory for sure.
Yeah, it's truly beautiful. Once again, Jesse, tell me more. Load us up.
Yeah, so once the war had ended and Reconstruction began, 1868, Smalls helped rewrite the state's constitution. So a little bit of background on this, actually. When the war had broken out, the Confederation, or the Confederacy, rather, they redrafted their own constitution, and each state also rewrote their own constitution to include the rights to own slaves and maintain the institution of slavery. So one of the points to return to the Union after the war was the Union want every single state to rewrite the Constitution yet again. And it's incredible that Smalls had the opportunity to assist in that. He pushed for voting rights, public education, and protections for freed people, laying groundwork for a more democratic South. I just have to say, this is one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand. And I've said this before on the podcast. The African-American community embodies the ideals of republicanism in the American Revolution, I think, more than most communities throughout American history. This is a community that went from, the institution of slavery to using the same system that oppressed them to secure their freedoms. And yet, through that system, we're still yet oppressed for another 100 years before the civil rights. And I just think that persistence, that moral fiber, that consistency, that resilience is not just admirable, it is American as fuck. You know what I mean? And it's just like, it's incredible. How, one of the things I say to myself is, if I were a member of the African-American community and I was just recently freed, would I not feel resentment towards the country? Or would I use its democratic institutions? And I think this is important. I think it's important because I see a lot of people, I'll be honest, on the left these days that look at the system and say, let's throw it away because it doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
And it's interesting that they didn't even think this way. They thought the opposite, that the system broken, I'm going to fix it. I'm not only that, I'm going to do, in this case, what Robert Small does. It says here, Smalls began his political career by representing Beaufort. He worked to expand civil rights and establish one of the first statewide public school systems in the South ever.
Wow.
On top of that, in 1870s through 1875, he continued championing education, civil rights, and economic opportunities for formerly enslaved citizens. Smalls became a leading voice in the Reconstruction politics. He was even, from 1875 to 1887, elected to U.S. Congress for multiple terms. Smalls served 5 non-consecutive terms in Congress. He fought against segregation, defended voting rights, and opposed withdrawing federal protection from Black voters, predicting the consequences of Jim Crow. So he could see, I mean, what a man who's so in tune with his times, that throughout each stage of his life, he's adapting his skills and responding accordingly the way he needs to. He did this when, obviously, he was a slave. He did this when he was a naval officer in military service of both the Confederacy and the Union. And yet he does it yet again as a senator, seeing the tide and the wave of Jim Crow, seeing Reconstruction failing, seeing the North acquiesce to the South and giving them over control. He sees this and he's actively fighting against it.
Right. I mean, at every turn, analyzing how can I be a change maker here? Where could I be effective, and how do I lift the rest of my people up is impressive.
Yeah, I mean, just the consistency, right? The strength of character that we're talking about, all the way from courage to planning to risk to standing up for others, and also, and I think it was such a good point, and I love it when you bring it up, Fingers, and to maintain your humanity through all of that. We know how racist things were in the South for long after slavery ended, right? And so then just to be able to, first of all, achieve that level of fame, get white voters to vote for you, the level of respect, it's emanating the level of respect that people had for this man.
So, I mean, I want to jump in right there and say that's part of the issue, though, right? I mean, the entire purpose of the 3/5 compromise was because African Americans outnumbered whites in the South by a considerable margin. And the South wanted the political power with getting them counted as population, but didn't want to give them the vote, right? So that they could cement minority rule and wield the political power of all those bodies. And ironically, it's the North that said, well, we won't give you full credit for each of them as a full human being. That's the compromise, right? My point being here, it's that immediately post the Civil War, African Americans had control of the political processes as long as there was a recently fair vote, because there was way more of them than there were of the whites. So, and a lot of the narrative that we hear to this very day about how poor people will just use the government to vote themselves benefits on the back of the wealthy, like came out of that exact period. And it's the exact same thing. Heather Cox Richardson makes this point in her book, How the South Won the Civil War. It's the exact same fucking narrative. So, I'm sure there were some white people that voted for him, but he, could enjoy political power based upon the fact that African Americans were enfranchised for the first time, right? And the other thing that occurs to me is like, this is obviously a very intelligent man. This is a very intelligent and capable man. And the tragedy to me is realizing that his circumstances, the fact that he grew up where he did on the coast, the fact that he was able to be trained in seafaring, put him in a situation where he was able to make the most of these opportunities. And we can guarantee, just thinking about this rationally and clearly, that there are other people who are equally as capable and equally intelligent who perished under slavery because they didn't have those opportunities.
That's a fantastic point.
Yeah, it is. And I think that, and I think it also, we like to make parallels with the modern day in history, obviously, on this podcast. And I think that, pointing out how this is still so relevant today, right? There are so many people, and affording opportunities to folks is so important. Just like it was then, the stakes are maybe not as high as they once were, right? In some of those circumstances. But, we can say, well, these people perished during slavery that never had opportunities, right? There are probably people walking among us here in the United States that are not having opportunities afforded to them the way that they should be. And what are we missing? What are we missing out on? Who are we missing out on because of that?
I think, it just underscores the importance to access to education and literacy, which is the intentional degradation of education in this nation. So integral to what's happening right now, and the inability of people to aggregate and process information on the scale which is coming to us now. And that's something we need to address, lest we all be thrust back into this. Like, without that, I mean, you're really just obviously you're at a strategic disadvantage, and you're really just no longer at the helm of your own future.
All of these potential strengths and these potential contributors we're willing to toss aside just to make the world safe for mediocre white men.
Right.
The original DEI.
Original DEI. Oh, love it.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's continue here. It says, after he had served his time and looking at the tides of Jim Crow coming as Reconstruction had ended, Smalls returned to his state, and he was appointed a U.S. collector of customs at the port of Beaufort until 1913. So from 1889 to 1913, he spent the rest of his life there. Smalls was a respected federal officer for over 2 decades, despite political battles and attempts by white supremacists to remove him. His service symbolized Black leadership and dignity during the rise of segregation and Jim Crow in the South. In 1895, at a convention designed to disenfranchise Black voters, Smalls gave a powerful speech condemning the racist laws. He said, in particular, my race needs no special defense. All they need is an equal chance in the battle of life. His words became a testament to faith in a democracy, even when democracy had failed him, that he had fought for.
Yeah,
It says he...
I'm sorry, go ahead. I was just gonna say about people. It's on the left, and I have this conversation a lot with people. Like, well, maybe some things need to be changed. Yeah, no fucking shit, right? But you certainly don't scrap something as historical. I mean, just unprecedented as the United States Constitution. You build on it. It's a framework, and that's why we have 2 processes for amendment. And I think a lot of people don't understand the power vacuum that would ensue that thereafter, but. It also, what I was going to say about the 3/5 compromise earlier is, that really underscores sort of the struggle, the betrayal of liberation movements, even by progressive liberals, progressives at each stage in history, and the fact that the Civil War was not really about liberation. So, just gonna make that point.
Right, absolutely. It says here that in 1900, after decades of petitioning Congress, Smalls finally received compensation for capturing the Planter, the ship, obviously. It says here, the long delays symbolize the uphill battle Black veterans faced for recognition and justice. He had retired his post in 1913 as the collector of customs in Port Beaufort, and Smalls died a respectable community leader. And on his tombstone appears his famous quote, "My race needs no special defense. All they need is an equal chance in the battle of life." And thus ended the life of an incredible, incredible hero. I wanna throw this out real quick before we discuss things. I want you guys to guess when his statue was put up in South Carolina.
Last year.
Oh, yeah. I'm going with very recent. I'm gonna say, ooh, that's tough. Let's see, we got 2024, so I would say 2023. I wouldn't think it would be under the Trump administration. Let's say that.
Fingers, any idea?
I was going to say 2023 also.
The answer is July of this year.
Wow, really?
Yeah, so it says more than 100 years after his death, Robert Smalls, a Civil War hero, an education advocate, and a South Carolina politician, will be honored with a statue on the State House grounds.
Oh,
After over 100 years. It's insane that it took 100 years.
it's insane that it took 100
That it
years.
took
for
100
sure.
years. More than 100 years. But they finally have a statue on the state grounds, House grounds in South Carolina dedicated to Robert Smalls.
To the point of him fighting for Black veterans, isn't it wild to think about the year we're talking about and then fast forward to the Vietnam War and even thereafter and the struggle to still get Black veterans treated with respect and dignity?
Right.
I mean, yeah, I mean, the thing that leapt out at me is like all of this. Look, he's a hero. This is amazing. Spread it across the union. Wait, you want money?
Right.
It's
You want us to do something
so
about it?
fucking
Hold
American.
on.
Not so fast.
Wait a minute now.
I mean, look, I'm pressed at this point. I'm starting to sense that there's most likely no way that every individual from the Heroes of Humanity series will end up on my wall, because I think that I've got pictures of, I don't know if you guys know the story, and this is a little bit of a deviation, but I do tend to surround myself with things that inspire me when able. And one of the stories, if you guys remember, I think it was the Peruvian, Argentinian soccer team that crashed in the Andes. And then I've got a picture of those two men the day that they made it back down into the valley and linked up with one of the local cattle herders. And there's this picture of them with, this cowboy behind them, and they're sitting there, and they're very obviously worn down. If you don't know the story, those two men realized that after they had survived the winter, most of the people had died, the ones that had survived the crash, I believe. And so they realized, hey, there's no way they're still searching for us, right? Because they had been gone, I think, 70 something days. And, that people were saying, there's no way these people survive, right? They filled their pockets with human meat to survive on and walked 10 days out of those mountains. So every time I think I'm having a bad day, that's the picture that's next to my chair on the wall. They've asked about it. Hey, who are these guys? Why is this the only picture you have up?
That's funny. I remember asking you that. And you're like, yeah, but I mean, that's just, there's, you didn't tell them the quote, right? I think when we talked about last time, you as a why to go on, will basically can withstand anyhow. And that's just the spirit of survival. And I think that's something that people who try to oppress people are missing. You know what I mean? You can, this is even evident in our occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan. There are some places in the world that you can't conquer fucking spirit. You know what I mean? You just can't. They're going to fight you in their...
Yeah.
They're going to fight you to the death every time. And you would just have to kill me before you you occupy us or you enslave us or whatever the case is. And, I'm sure Fingers is seeing on my page. I'm about to take my daughter to that, King's Day too. You have to take these rights from my dead hands. Okay. Just make sure you know that. And that's just the way it is. And that's why there's always a struggle with oppression, and there will always be a movement for liberation as long as there is oppression going on here.
And governments continue over and over to fail to learn the lesson of like, if your territory has a lot of mountains, yeah, don't go cash that check, because like mountainous areas the world over are home to indigenous resistant movements, whether they're the Montagnards in Southeast Asia, obviously the Afghans, like the Colombian, highlands in Peru and all of that. So
Let me get the Highland.
the rednecks in West Virginia. Like these are all places where
Absolutely
people who want to make trouble for the system can vanish into.
Well, and I mean, you guys are so right on every one of those points. And I do want to bring up about the Montagnards. So for those that don't know, I did spend many years in Special Forces, and I was an instructor in the Special Forces qualification course for small unit tactics. And one of the we have role players that come out and they participate. And Montagnards were some of those role players, people that had helped that fight. And so they would come out as a part of the Q course. And we always loved it when they did. Some cats can cook. Ain't no way. You're living in a field environment and they show up, man, pots, pans, fires, and they will not let you not eat. You know what I mean? So really, really fantastic nod to those folks.
That's awesome. That's fantastic, actually. I want to point out one of the things that I love about this story in particular is his service in the U.S. Senate and as the U.S. Collector of Customs. I think it speaks volumes about his perspective, where Robert Smalls could have been so discouraged, saying, "Hey, after finally fought for my freedom, fought for this country, I'm still, oppressed in the U.S. Senate. I'm still, looked down upon. My education for my family being taken away, voter rights being taken away in the South." He could have kind of just given up and said, "You know what, I'm not doing this anymore." And he just didn't do that. And I think that just shows a spirit of resilience that is just absolutely incredible in the face of one of the most horrific wars in U.S. history. And I think, I don't know, I think it says stuff about where we should be at. I see a lot of people discouraged these days. A lot of people saying the system doesn't work, I'm giving up, voting doesn't matter, kind of thing. And yet we see Robert Smalls, who didn't feel that way, didn't succumb to such doubts and thoughts and say, "You know what, I'm not going to do this anymore. Screw this. It's just not worth it," kind of thing. If anything, it was the opposite, right? He saw that we needed to fight even harder in a different form, on a different battlefield, in a different way, basically, right? And so changing his tactics yet again from the battlefield, he even mentions it. It's literally on his tombstone. Literally, "My race needs no special defense. All they need is an equal chance in the battle of life." So he clearly saw these things as like struggles and willing to meet the challenge and on every single playing field that he needed to meet it on.
And pivoting off of that, the thing that strikes me, because you mentioned like people who are like, "Oh, voting doesn't matter, blah, blah, blah." And, you'd spoken earlier about him embracing and saying we can change the system and, being more American than Americans. What does that make me think of? Zoran Mamdani, right? Like all of the political disaffection in this country, all of the people saying, "Oh, you can't change the system." And it takes immigrants who buy off on our sales pitch and say, no, this is what I was sold. This is what I'm going to get.
Promise me a dream.
And it's like, no, I was told that this is a democracy. No, I was told anybody can be what they want to be. No, I was told that this is someplace where we can change the system for the better. And so by God, I'm going to show up and demand all those things. And, that is the parallel that leaps out to me. The other thing, which is, if we just take the facts of his life post-Civil War at face value, it kind of gives the impression that everything settled down and, there were still challenges, there was still racism, but essentially things were normalized. And, he had this political career. Just north of him in North Carolina, white supremacists overthrew the state government in 1898. Like this was hardly a calm and settled time and like getting back to normal. And also like I'd heard of that before, and the year had not stuck in my head. It's 1898. It's 2 years before, the 20th century. Like this is very, very late. So the fact that he navigated through all of that, through that time and maintained a position of influence, that's very, very impressive. Especially when he had folks like these running around.
You were waiting for that.
Little product placement. Yeah. I think, it's one thing I think is as an integral skill or quality or characteristic is adaptability. and the ability to sort of assess your situation as it is objectively, and make your decisions on that basis. And I think that's something he displayed well, right? Like, where's the fight? Let me take it to it. Yeah, and I'm gonna adapt that however I can. And also the understanding of how, I think you've heard like the quote, like, lost the battle, won the war situation. Like,
Yeah.
there are fights at various levels of what's happening, and some of those, and it looks like towards later in his life, were fighting on a broader level to empower the Black community and aggregate power in minorities, so that the fight's a little easier on everybody. And I was just looking at some of the other interesting facts of his life. And he was actually charged with bribery by a white supremacist in 1877. He was convicted in a rigged trial, and the verdict was overturned. And despite the harassment, 5 U.S. presidents, Grant through McKinley, kept him in federal office as a Beaufort customs collector for nearly 20 years. So that's crazy. The other thing is, his family kept his legacy alive, and his great-great-grandson became the founding president of the International African American Museum in Charleston, South Carolina. So,
Wow, that's amazing.
isn't it?
Yeah.
That's incredible. I didn't know that.
I think it speaks to something that, I can't say it's on the white side, right? It is, legacy admission to colleges and the use of that to oppress others. But in minority communities, legacy means something different. You know what I mean? And I think white people are really missing that, especially when you talk about the fight for liberation. And I think that what's happening today sort of underscores that, because you see people trying to scramble and organize. And don't get me wrong, keep doing it, guys. But there's a roadmap to dealing with this if we just would, maybe take a minute to listen.
Yeah. And look, we are optimists largely on this podcast, with a nice little sprinkle of cynicism in there, I think, mostly from fingers. But no, I think people should really be encouraged right now. We just heard Heather Cox Richardson talking about, like, these are the types of things, the things we're seeing in the United States now are the types of things that get people civically engaged. And, I think she made the point that every few generations, when the major problems emerge, one generation has a much bigger impact politically than the rest. And I think we are at the dawn of seeing that right now.
Yeah, that was her point about the rise of civic engagement. All of the nonprofits and coalitions that are propping up. That's the work, If you think the United States Constitution is not working, and obviously we know here that it's not worked for everybody, but that is our fault. So
Yeah.
let's do something about it. And we have the opportunity right now, a very unique opportunity, to do something about it. And he made the point, Robert Smalls made the point, that if white supremacists were allowed to wield power again in the South, that the Black American would be wiped out. And yeah, I'll try to temper my language, but our inability to, heed that warning and properly deal with the treasonous South is why we're here. And I think we need to take a minute and have a consensus among the American people that won't happen again, because that is also an integral part of what's happening here. He also had 2 U.S. Navy ships named after him. That's dope.
I think.
And
Oh, sorry. Didn't realize you. Go ahead. So I think, I was thinking about that same thing when you were talking about it, and how talking about the need to create mechanisms of resistance, need to stand up, need to, like, make your voices heard, and all of those kinds of things. And I need to make a plea to my fellow vanilla people to not center themselves in that struggle, right? Because, to Bobby's point, like, we never really fully reckoned with the Civil War. We know white supremacy is something that, like, moves through our society, and it expresses itself in places that are maybe uncomfortable for white liberals to think about. Like in the narrative we tell ourselves about the civil rights movement, about how it was white people going down to the South and making freedom rides, that's what broke the bank. He's like, no, there were, like, decades of African Americans working for their own freedom down there, and white people showed up and got at the front of the line and said it was about us, like it was before. And when I say this, of course, I sound like I'm diminishing the contributions of those people, and I do not mean to be. I'm talking about the narratives we tell ourselves after the fact. it's kind of a weird tangent, but it's like the same thing after World War II, right? We tell ourselves this narrative about we came marching in to save the day, and the English would be speaking German if not for us. And it's like, hey, guess who actually fucking destroyed the fearsome German war machine? It was the fucking Soviets. So no, we showed up late again. We mopped up. We constantly tell ourselves this narrative about, how amazing, the white folks are, and like how we have centered ourselves in all of these things. And in terms, if we're really going to affect change, if we're really going to make a systemic change that is going to stick, we have to abandon that. We have to like pull ourselves back into ranks and not necessarily get behind, but just like, elevate everybody around us, make everybody part of one thing. Because I mean, we have Medicaid as part of, the struggle for civil rights, because there was such, political momentum towards people's voices being heard. And, that came on the back of people of color. So I know I'm kind of like bouncing around here. This is something that has to happen. Speaking for myself as a white man, you wouldn't know it from the way I speak on this podcast, but I do make an effort, like sometimes, to just sit down and shut the fuck up. Right? Like sometimes I think the greatest contribution a white man can make to a conversation is with his ears, because that hasn't happened enough.
So well, y'all probably know, but this is a rant I go on. Often fingers have been scolded for it. But again, the idea that, and you actually hear this in so many conversations about how white people, it's like, I mean, there's a name for it, right? The white savior complex. If you are an ally, and you're saving the Black community, all that's saying is I'm wielding my power to unshackle you a little bit. But are you giving your power to them? Like it is about dismantling the power structure so that there's a more equitable distribution of power and people can wield their own autonomy. It's not about being like, oh, I let the leash off on my dog a little bit, like one of those retractable leashes. You know what I mean? And so there's a difference. There's a difference in those things. And, I think it's important for you to use your privilege, but it has got to be in the effort to dismantle an oppressive power structure. And I think that most often what you're actually seeing is white people soothing their own ego and trying to, hold on to a little bit of their own humanity, like that makes them feel like they're doing something. But it is too often not actually in the endeavor of liberating oppressed communities. And that's the blue bracelet liberal. And you should listen to Malcolm X's Powder Bullet.
I was about to bring out Powder Bullet. I knew you would.
Well, no, one of the things I want to mention that you guys are talking about to kind of wrap it in is, I think, so you had mentioned the historian Heather Cox Richardson, and she does this really good historical analysis of American history. And part of this historical analysis says the American experiment is continuously oscillating between two different visions. One is seeking to expand the definition of we the people, and the other one is seeking to restrict it and preserve privileges for a few. And this theme is constantly throughout American history. We see it from the founding, before the Constitution was even ratified. We see it in the Federalists versus the Anti-Federalists. We see it in the discussion and war for the institution of slavery. We see it in Reconstruction. We see it during the Gilded Age. Every single decade of American history, we see these forces oscillating. Right? Should we expand and secure more freedoms for more individuals, or should we restrict it and define it not on ideals, but on culture and heritage? And this is the same battle we are having today. It's the same, Biden was right when he said this is a battle for the soul of the nation. He wasn't wrong. It's a battle for how we define America. And listen, I've said this before. When you have the vice president, J.D. Vance, at the Claremont Institute, giving a speech about how the ideals that make up American citizenship in America are too broad and encompassing, and that those who fought on the Civil War are more entitled to it than those who criticize them, you are redefining American citizenship on culture and heritage. This goes all the way back to what Robert Smalls was doing. right? Where the South was seeking to make about culture and heritage, and Robert Small decided to appeal to higher ideals. He decided to say, no, I don't believe that. I actually do believe the original principles of the American Revolution and of republicanism, and what the Constitution enshrined, that all men are created equal, that I should strive for freedom and liberty, right? And I'm not going to sit down and just take this. I'm going to fight on every single battlefield. So these two forces, we still see the same thing. And the last thing I want to say to lay my plan to let you guys, talk, is these strains of expanding We the People or restricting it are passed down throughout the generations. The civil rights didn't just come out of nowhere. The civil rights obviously came built on the shoulders of great men and women prior to it, right? That passed on their story to their ancestors, that passed on their story through word, through deed, through character, through service, through books, through learning, through tradition, right? In building communities is how they pass these things on. And it shows the resilience of both sides. It shows the resilience that people like Robert Smalls, people like Frederick Douglass, people like W.E.B. Du Bois, with all their contributions, it's easy to look at history and say, oh, the time and they lived in diminished their voices and they're forgotten about. So what's the point? They didn't actually make change. And that's just not true. We know this is not true because we see the effects of it. So, I just want to say, in the same way that we could look at American history and we can see these two opposing forces continue throughout American history in what we see now today, right, with oppressing individuals and the other side trying to expand freedoms, it benefits us to stay in the fight, because the future, I believe, if we make it this way, truly will be brighter. Because I'll tell you right now, if I lived in Reconstruction era and I was a black man, I'd be like, there's just no hope. Like, we just fought a war over this, and they're you know what I mean? There's just no hope. We just fought a war over this. They're restricting our voting rights. I can't go to the polls. I'm getting arrested now because of the 13th Amendment. I cannot be a slave yet again because of imprisonment. I feel hopeless, kind of thing, especially leading up to the 1900s, 1920s, with the height of racial violence. And I think it's easy to look at our own situation and feel disparaged. But I think, and I'll end here, I think it benefits us to look at the historical precedent set before by past Americans that were faced with just as dire, if not worse, situations, and yet believed in the ideals of American democracy to push forward, persevere, and create a more perfect union.
Damn, Jesse almost made me cry.
Well, I know. And I mean, look, here's, I've made this point, and we wouldn't be, again, disorderly conduct without bringing it up. The American people are undefeated against tyranny. And the hubris that exists to believe that you can come in, do away with the Constitution, stomp on the American people, and that you're going to succeed is fucking, and it's actually kind of an impressive level of hubris to believe that.
Mistaken.
Yeah, it's a mistake.
I think that, like, we always talk about pick up a book. There's, what does he say? History doesn't repeat, but it does instruct. And what I was talking about with the playbook to resisting oppression is exactly what you just laid out, Jesse. And, people, I think maybe it's like this era of like instant gratification, but there's not just going to be a single event and then there's no oppression and there's no, no conflict. The battles of history have been won incrementally. The fight for liberation has been won incrementally. And I wish it could be different, but the reality is we've got to take our lessons from the past and build on them. That's how movements and liberation move forward. And so that's why it's crucial for us to be informed about history and how these things were won. What was the price that people paid? How do we mitigate that? Who were the vulnerable populations and how do we mitigate that? You know what I mean? Like, where is the crux of power right now? How do we attack it? I mean, there's so many different things. And we had a conversation about creativity the other day, which I'm often like, oh, I can't draw, but creativity really comes in so many forms, and the American people have got to be creative right now. We've been instructed by democratic backsliding in Germany and other democratic nations. And so, you take a look at what works and what didn't work, and then you apply that to your circumstances. And it takes a lot of minds to do that. And I think that is the beautiful part about what Heather Cox Richardson was saying about organizing right now. If people criticizing the No King's Day too, there are no demands. I think the demand is perfectly fucking clear. But what's greater than that is the organizing in person and the connecting that the American people are doing. I am watching coalition after coalition after coalition connect across the nation. And each coalition is 50 to 100 different organizations with national or semi-regional reach. And things are born out of that will propel this nation forward in a way that, many other events won't. And it is absolutely a battle for the narrative of what's American. But there's an objective fucking truth to what's American. And it's certainly not white, heterosexual, fucking Christian bullshit.
I feel so attacked. Oh, wait, you said Christian. Never mind. So,
Right.
you make a point, Jesse. What you said before about being in Reconstruction and feeling, despair because, oh, look, we've literally fought a war and things are rolling back. And I think of the parallel right now because I have my moments where I feel the same thing. It's like, fuck. I thought we answered this question. I thought we had
Right.
decided white supremacy was a bad thing. I thought we had decided that like we were a nation of immigrants and that was our strength. Like, what the fuck is happening? And,
Wow.
I think that there is a large, I'm sure I'm not alone in that feeling, right? And I think that there can be an inclination to despair. There can be an inclination to, well, what can you do? It's just the wealthy have the power and it just is what it is. And I want to tell you folks, despair is the refuge of the privileged because people who can say, well, I can't really
Facts.
change anything, but I'm still going to be able to my material conditions are not going to be substantially affected, have the privilege and luxury of despair. People who are marginalized communities who are literally under threat do not have that privilege. They do not have the choice of just accepting what's going to happen and just whatever is going to happen because they literally have to fight for their lives. So, just take that in the vein which it's offered. And,
I mean, I'm sorry. Go.
sorry. The other thing, like somebody said this the other day, I saw it and I thought it was a really powerful metaphor. Because the point was made about how Bernie has been banging on about universal health care and Medicare for all for more than a decade. And it seems like nobody can move the needle, right? And the person that statement was made to countered and said, well, I think political movements and political progress is like boiling water. You put a pot on the stove and you put it under heat. And for the longest time, you don't see anything happening. For the longest time, it seems like nothing is happening. And then seemingly almost instantaneously, when the course of about 20 seconds, it goes from being a still pot of water to a rolling boil. And he thinks that's the way politics works. So for the people who are inclined to despair, who are inclined to think that things can't change, understand that heat is being injected into the body.
We're out of simmer.
Everybody needs to add their own little heat, right? To keep expanding the metaphor, like heat is molecules moving around and containing more energy. So each of
My
us
God, I
as
love that.
molecules need to generate more heat, more motion, more bounce up against our neighbor.
I bounce around in this motherfucker.
Yeah. And then you can affect change. So there's a whole nother diatribe. You guys know me. I want to go off about the confluence of wealth privilege and racial privilege. I will just say it's pretty obvious from the planters class and how much overlap there is between the power that wealth exerts and the oppression that wealth exerts and the oppression that racial privilege exerts. But go ahead, Bobby, I cut you off.
Oh no, you're fine. And I think that's such a salient point about the boil. And I think that you have seen that. That's a little bit of what produced Donald Trump because the Democratic Party fractured itself when we started this summer. And so we're going to take some lessons from that, right? But you see it with Mamdani. You see it with progressive candidates across the nation. We are definitely out of fucking summer. So crank up the heat. You know what I mean? It's pedal to the floor right now. You don't back down. It's like what's happening right now is like we were talking about the despair and we just fought a war with this. Okay. You're right. It's like, if you can drive a stick, right? And you had a red light on a hill. You don't take your foot off the brake when you're in neutral. You smash the gas when you're in first. You know what I mean? And you got to be a little bit tactful about it, but it's like, or if you're changing your oil on a hill, you put wheel chucks behind the car. Don't roll back because that's what they're trying to do now. So the American people are beckoned to prevent the backsliding of rights in this nation, which is what they're doing. They're using this context of immigration and the other immigrants to attack the Black community in an insidious fucking way. And, that's why you see these signs, we're not going back. And that is the fucking truth. But they want you to feel despair, which is why they suppress images of protests and they propagate this narrative that we're terrorists or that the numbers were weak. But the reality is, go out and look at your community. Go out right now and look at the people coming together to support each other. Food bank resources. I have a bakery near me that was like free birthday cakes or cupcakes to kids that can't afford them. If you're affected by these things, I mean, turkey drives, like you're watching the American spirit turn up the fucking heat. And so just get involved, man. That's all we have to do is keep the pedal to the floor.
Right. You know, I think it was Mark Twain that said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Right? And I think that's an important thing to remember. Another one of his quotes that I love, and I share this a lot with Bobi. I've been through some terrible things in my life, some of which actually happened.
Well, there's a third one that I think isn't as particularly poignant here. A man who doesn't read is just as bad off as a man that can't. So
I have one more. My favorite, I like both of those, but my favorite Mark Twain quote is, politicians should be changed as often as diapers, and often for the same reason.
you soiled, motherfucker.
That's not the word I was thinking of, but I got you.
Yeah. You know, you mentioned it, Bobi, and so I'm going to take this moment for any listeners. If you are in a position to where you can help, yes, the latest news, like we're recording this on Sunday, November 9th. The latest news is that they're actually going to fully fund SNAP. Do not take your foot off the gas. If you are in a position where you are able to make contributions to your local food bank, continue to do so. And no, I do not mean go through your cupboard and take out your old cans that you don't want anymore. It is not meaningless, but it's not nearly as meaningful as if you can come up $100 to give to your local food bank. They get deals to buy food in bulk that will like expand the reach of that $100 far beyond what you could do by going down to your local grocery store and buying a bunch of cans. If you are in a position to come off some green notes, do so. Make it a habit. Build it into your budget. We have to beef up these local food support programs because this is the beginning of, well, not the beginning, but a major part of building mutual aid networks, of building systems locally sourced, locally based that are capable of withstanding a government that is going to be capricious. And that is, I mean, this is the first time in U.S. history we've seen a U.S. president weaponize hunger against his own population. We have to build defenses against that. And the food bank, like, make it part of your budget if you can. I mean, if you can't, you can't, right? But if you can, put that in your budget. Say, I'm going to, give $100 to my local food bank, And then, of course, we're in November. Thanksgiving, like this is the month of the calendar that's about food, that's about bountifulness. I can't come up with the right word at the moment, but you get me. It is imperative that we part of the heat, part of spreading the heat from each other. It's easy to think of that as anger, but warmth is heat. Extending warmth to your neighbor, like extending, the warmth of love to your neighbor is part of the general injecting heat into the body politic. And last point, you mentioned creativity earlier, Bobi. I am an artist. I have been an artist most of my life. I fundamentally feel like creativity is the core thing that sets human beings apart from the rest of the animal kingdom. We create for the sake of creating. We create art, and creativity has been a huge part of resistance throughout history. Look at what the Ukrainians have done with drones and used drones in all sorts of ways that nobody would have expected previously. But the story that I heard recently that I'll leave you with is in Poland in the late 70s, very early 80s, they had a very oppressive government and they would crack down on all forms of political expression. And so if anybody wrote any graffiti on the wall, the government would come around and paint it over with a white swatch, right? And so what people started doing is they would go draw silly pictures of elves and fairies on these patches of white, which had nothing to do. There was no connected political message. It was not a symbol of any political resistance or whatever. It was purely whimsy, which then forced the government to go back around and paint over these silly pictures of elves, which then trivializes the government in general. And then people would show up and they showed up, I want to say it was outside one of the main state houses or something, singing whatever the national hymn was that was in support of the government, and also singing songs about these fairies and everything. And so they've got cops coming around and arresting people. And it's oh, you're arresting us for singing about fairies. And just that creativity, that little of a whimsy that just delegitimized the power of the state and wound up, making a big difference over time. Creativity is a big part of that.
Yeah.
I really agree.
I mean, art plays a significant role just in humanity in general, right? Art and music and just telling the story of people and humanity. But it plays a big role in resistance too. And the other thing is you tie resources, you're breaking the ego of an oppressive regime. And I think that's really important because it also boosts morale. You know, it's camaraderie. It's a little bit of light in the suffering. And I think, you know, that's just a really important thing to consider. There's so many facets so to how you sort of, you know, deal with oppressive circumstances. You've seen it in you know in enslaved communities. I mean, the music and the different, you know, the songs. I mean, they tell stories, right? They tell history, and I don't know. Maybe that's lost on some people. I just can't draw the stickers. Okay.
I would agree to your guys' point. Like we said previously, the objective is to dehumanize people, right? And art is the most creative tool that expresses humanity, right? So if you want to dehumanize someone, take away their art, because art is the ultimate form of humanity. It's the ultimate form of creative human expression, right?
I was on mute, but I literally said, as you said it, I was like, express humanity.
Yeah, literally, right? You know, and it's interesting to think about, right? When we think about our previous empires, we don't tend to think about law, right? We tend to think about Roman art, right? We tend to think about Roman poetry, statues, mosaics, things like that, right? So yeah, I wanna wrap this up. I wanna let you guys go ahead and say your final piece, and then we'll close out.
So for me, first and foremost, Jesse, thank you for such a compelling hero of humanity for the November series. Always grateful to see what you guys come up with. And hey, this podcast, as we like to say, is very positive. And remember, freedom is not just the absence of evil, but the presence of good. Stay involved, support your community, and share that warmth that Fingers so eloquently pointed out.
My piece as, you know, take in as much information as you can. Look at your circumstances and look what's happening across the nation. Try to differentiate fact from conclusion and understand that there's a break happening right now, and it is an opportunity for the American people. So pedal to the floor.
Thanks for the subject, Jesse. And yeah, I look forward to talking with y'all as I always do.
Yeah, absolutely. And to all our viewers and listeners, just want to remind you guys, we're dropping weekly episodes. Podcast is now on all major platforms, except not Spotify, right, Fingers?
That's a separate topic, but
Gotcha,
at the
right.
moment, it's available on Spotify. We
Okay.
actually have to have a conversation about, and I'll make this for the listeners too. We're going to have a conversation about whether it is more worthwhile to get our message out onto a platform that is actively running ads for ICE recruitment, or if we are going to refuse to participate on that platform for that very reason. I am torn. We're going to have off here. We're going to have a discussion about that and go from there.
No, absolutely. That makes sense. So yeah, catch us on our podcast. We're dropping much more regularly, and we are excited for the next Heroes of Humanity series in November. So join us next week for the next one. I think Fingers is going to take care of that one, so I'm very excited to see what he's going to do. And I want to close out with a little spin on Robert Small's phrase. I'm going to change it up a little bit. Our cause needs no special defense. All we need is an equal chance at the battle for democracy. I'm going to change it up a little bit to have the listeners and viewers think about that. So thank you guys for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Disorderly Conduct Podcast, a production of the Public Integrity Network. We believe that the first step to taking back our democracy is getting money out of politics. Come find us at moneyoutofpolitics.org and we'll put you to work. In the meantime, get involved in your community. Volunteer at a soup kitchen. Start a rideshare service. Go to school board meetings. Anything you can to make sure this government remembers that their powers derive from the consent of the governed.